I did all the things he wanted me to, out of respect, out of anger. The thing that he didn't tell me was what I was supposed to do after I got to the end of that list.
In about 35% of suicides, there is a history of drug or alcohol abuse. Nick McCrae had been drinking daily since high school and jokingly called himself a functioning alcoholic. He was a successful and respected technical writer who dreamed of being a Hollywood screenwriter. But at age 34, he took a gun, went to his favorite picnic spot, and shot himself. He'd been married 10 years to his writing partner, Samantha.
In a way, I don't really know why Nick killed himself. Because there's a part of me that doesn't know who Nick was, and that is frightening. That really is. Because you're very intimate with a husband, and yet now I find out there was a big part of Nick, I mean a really big part of him, I didn't know.
Dearest Samantha, we have often talked about when a person's time is up. Mine is now.
Nick was bright and charming. He had a great sense of humor. He was always up, laughing. If he walked into a room, you'd be mesmerized by him in 5 minutes. He'd have you, I swear to God. He had a knack. I used to watch him with people. He was very clever.
I can no longer endure the pain. I made it last as long with you as I could. I love you with all my souls to come.
I never saw him without a drink. It was his way of coping. It was how he remained charming and up. He didn't look like a drunk. He never slurred his words. He didn't fall down. He was as collected as I am right now. He was kind of the golden-haired child. He was extremely bright. I'm sure his IQ was way above average. And I think he kept setting his standards higher and higher, of course, so he never could attain them. And he just felt like a failure.
Nothing is more important than you. You cannot doubt yourself. I will return to you soon, so you cannot go away in body or soul.
Nick was very spiritual, and he believed, and I believe, in reincarnation. And I think that's what he was alluding to in the letter when he said that he would come back. There's so many questions in suicide, and the person who kills himself takes a lot of those answers with them. I just want 5 minutes with Nick. I say this to the Great Spirit. Give me 5 minutes. I'm not going to wring his neck, I promise. I just want to ask him, why did you do this? I just want to know the answer. Because sometimes it drives you crazy going through life not knowing that answer. I know I have to let it go, but boy, there are some days I just want to talk to him for 5 minutes.
Frank Dobinson shared the dreams of most American men. Successful career, happy marriage, healthy kids. He also shared a pattern common to more and more men, the gradual evolution from occasional depression into suicidal despair. Dr. Frank Dobinson had a distinguished and productive career. He was a research scientist with 29 patents registered to his name. He had a wife and kids, and to all the world he appeared to have a rich and happy life. But at age 56, Frank walked out to his favorite beach in Pensacola, Florida, and shot himself in the head. In their bedroom, his wife discovered 15 suicide notes addressed to family and friends.
Olin, Evelyn once told Suzanne that I was the devil incarnate. It looks as if she was basically right. How could this happen to a
Suzanne,
family like There are about 5 options, and they're all horrible for everybody. I can't believe this. Bert, I have destroyed several families and some beautiful people with my evil.
This frenzy of communication just before his death provides a glimpse into the tortured mind of a brilliant man. 5 years after his death, those who received his notes still struggle to understand his suicide and to forgive.
The legacy he created for us is that we bear his pain, the pain he left behind and couldn't deal with. We take upon ourselves to try to resolve and understand why this happened. Because there was no doubt that he didn't love us. He loved us very much, all of us.
Frank Dobinson was born in England, the son of a poor, uneducated coal miner. But Frank was a gifted student, and with little support or understanding from his parents, he went on to earn a PhD in chemistry at Birmingham University. After graduation, he eagerly accepted an invitation to do research at the University of Texas, where he met his first wife, Eloise.
He was very enthusiastic about being in the United States. In Texas, it was sunny every day, and in England, it's raining every day. So he felt like every day was a holiday. Everyone thought that Frank was a very interesting, entertaining person to listen to. When we visited my parents, I could say something and my parents would just ignore me, and Frank could say something and they were just enthralled at whatever he said. Frank was on the fast track. At that time, PhDs were very much in demand in industry, so he had several job offers. I mean, he could take his pick.
Frank landed a prestigious job with Monsanto Chemical and began to raise a family.
When Claire was born, Frank would come to the hospital and he just couldn't take his eyes away from her. He was so proud.
Though life was good for the Dobinsons, during this same period, Frank began experiencing his first episodes of moodiness and self-doubt.
He would just sort of sit around, come home and just sit around in a lethargic manner. I would tell him, you know, you can't go on like this, and he would get angry at me and turn his anger against me.
Frank's physician suggested that he see a psychiatrist, but Frank didn't like the idea. Then a promotion at work jolted him out of his depression, temporarily.
He was becoming almost compulsive about achievement. That was his whole conversation. I've got to do this and I've got to do that. I think a lot of times he was hiding worried feelings.
Frank rose quickly through the research ranks at Monsanto, and after 5 years, he was transferred to the most desirable of the company's research centers in Pensacola, Florida. Here he found friendships that would last the next 20 years.
I'd say he was controversial, very bright, very quick-witted, and a very dry sense of humor, and some people didn't understand him. Some of us really delighted in it because where Frank was around, it could be interesting, it could be a lot of fun. If you're someone more conservative in personality, then Frank might be too much.
He was a very interesting person to talk to. He had interesting opinions, and he was interested in a lot of things. He was one of my better friends, and I always liked him and respected him. But when he didn't like something or he thought something was wrong, he expressed it very strongly and just slammed it home. He was absolutely fearless. That's the thing I admired about him, but I could see where it could get you in trouble.
Frank was highly opinionated and frequently vented his views in inter-office memos. Over the years, his letter writing increased and became more agitated. He wrote scathing letters to the newspaper, to senators, even to the president.
He was moving fast at that period. He got quick promotions. He'd gotten several of these achievement awards, bonuses of a month or two's pay. They were quite rare. He was clicking off his entrance requirements to get to the top.
He came in 1973, and he was telling me that he was unusually tired and that he was not sleeping well, and he had a lot of personal problems that were bothering him. He was obviously depressed, and I gave him some antidepressants.
All this time he was able to work, but at home he was just a vegetable. He would become angry and accuse me of being the cause of it all and drag up every bad thing I'd ever done or said. And then he would walk out. And this happened several times. And finally he walked out and never came back.
Although Frank's marriage was collapsing, Frank continued to project a strong image in the community. He joined the Symphony Board, where he was quickly elected president, and just as quickly fell in love. His romance was with fellow board member Suzanne Henry, a single mother with a 10-year-old son.
Frank Dobinson loved music. It was a passion. He could recreate symphonies in his head. He could hear a bar of music, tell you the composer, the year, the movement. He was magnificent. He could talk to you about anything, on any subject, with authority. We did everything together. We went out all sorts of places together at first. We would go to restaurants, we went to concerts, we took pictures, we went to the beach, we did marvelous things.
In 1977, soon after his divorce, Frank married Suzanne, against her father's better judgment.
When I first met Frank, I had reservations about Frank. He being a freshly divorced man and my daughter being very vulnerable at that time, I thought maybe she was getting into something that was bad for her. And I looked at Frank with a jaundiced eye, and I didn't think that he would be good for my grandson.
Actually, I had a hard time accepting the fact that I was getting a stepdad. And it took me a while to really accept him, you know, and we didn't really get along very well at all. I was hardly ever at school. I used to skip school a lot. I was always hanging out at the beach. Frank was always getting on my case about everything. He was good at ragging on people, you know, and he kind of kept me more in line than he did his own daughters.
Frederick was very antagonistic toward Frank, but as time went on, I began to mellow toward him and understand him better and decided that he would be good for the family.
He was really great in times of crisis, you know, he was always real supportive. When I had my right eye put out and a surfing injury, he was right there beside me the whole time. I remember at one time he actually told me that he loved me, and that kind of really shocked me because he's not the kind of person to say something like that.
Two years after his marriage, Frank's daughters, Susan and Claire, had become a regular part of his new family. Gradually, he pulled together the loose ends of his personal life. But at Monsanto, his career had begun a downward spiral he could not stop. First, he was moved from research into manufacturing, and then was passed over for an important promotion. At age 48, he received his first negative review. It contained complaints that would continue for the next 8 years.
He'd alienated in some way enough people that he wasn't getting any help, and that it sort of came to a screeching halt. The victory stopped coming, and you start to doubt yourself when that happens. That has to be discouraging to anybody, but to a person who sees his life as going up constantly in steps. I mean, even parallel would bother him, never mind going the other direction.
He apparently was somewhat bypassed by Monsanto, and he felt like he was just sitting in a corner doing nothing at his job, and he felt like he could be more constructive and more helpful than he was being. And he became more depressed, and I changed his antidepressants. I changed him to Elavil, which is a different type of antidepressant, but it helped him more to calm his anger and help him to rest better.
3 months before Frank's suicide, Suzanne's mother had to be hospitalized. Suzanne spent almost every evening after work caring for her mother, and Frank found her absence unbearable.
And I told him, I said, honey, hang on. It won't be like this forever. But right now, my mother needs me. Frank was starting to act strange. His voice was starting to change pitch. His movements, his kinesics were a little different. He appeared to be walking as though he were floating on air. Every time you'd ask him a question, he'd say, I don't know, in an artificially high voice. And I thought, well, he's just pulling my chain. He's just trying to get attention. This is just, you know, this is a way of dealing with all this tragedy and all these problems.
Well, it never crossed my mind that something should be done. It never crossed my mind that Frank might be thinking about taking his own life.
The week of Frank's death started out in a bizarre way. I came home from work at noon on a Friday, and there was Frank standing in the driveway, saying, we're going to die, I've got to talk to you. So I got in the car, and he said, we're going to die a horrible death, we've got AIDS. I said, well, Frank, I just came from Dr. Jordan's office, let's turn around and get tested. What do you mean we have AIDS? He refused to do it, he refused to get tested, but he insisted he was sick.
Like many depressed people, Frank became obsessive about his health. Every day, AIDS was in the national headlines, and Frank became convinced that he had contracted the disease, though in fact, he had never been exposed to it. Brooding on his imagined condition, Frank wrote this note to his doctor.
Bert, I just saw a news item about a theory as to why, with so many hundreds of thousands of people apparently carrying the AIDS virus, why it is that so far only a relatively small number have developed it. I had been assuming an emotional shock such as my crippling and unexpected demotion could be the trigger.
In a second note, he explained how he planned to die.
I use propionitrile, CZH5CN, which liberates cyanide in the liver.
Frank took the poison before going to bed Monday night.
Monday night, he came home and stayed up all night vomiting. And Frank had a cast iron stomach. He never got sick to his stomach on any reason. And I said, Frank, let me take you to the hospital. Maybe they can give you a shot of Comprazine or something to keep the vomiting down. He said, no, it's just flu. Well, it was January, flu was going around, and I didn't doubt him. And the next morning, he got up and said, well, I'm going to get ready for work. I said, you can't go to work like this. Oh, well, you know me, honey. I have a cast iron stomach. I'm going to work. The Dutch are here.
Suzanne, this stuff has started to attack my brain. The Dutch are here today. I suddenly realized I'd not checked with them since Christmas about their shipment of stuff, chemicals. There are about 5 options, and they're all horrible for everybody.
Frank's letter is a rambling effort to justify suicide. as if he were still trying to convince himself.
I can't see any ways out of hell for me who deserves it, or you who are so completely faultless. I am killing and destroying you and your family as surely as with a rifle, but slower, and I can't see any way out.
Tuesday night, he engineered a fight with me, trying to say, well, you've never cooked meals. Oh, my God, I cooked 3 meals a day for years. And that I never cleaned house, but I had a mother in the hospital, and I was working full-time. He just sort of started nibbling around at some rather aggressive ways at me, and I said, well, Frank, if I've been a bad wife, I know I've been a little strange lately with Mom sick, but if I've been a bad wife, you can always divorce me. And he said, oh, I should be dead. I said, what do you mean you should be dead? He said, I should be dead. I said, Frank, that is stupid. That is stupid. Of course not. I said, don't even talk to me.
Frank's unrelenting self-hatred is revealed in the apologetic style of his notes.
Glenn, if you are reading this, then I expect I am dead. I am sorry. Jim, I'm going to try to kill myself, though it will destroy several fine people. Fred, what sorry fathers you have had. But Joe is 1,000,000 times better than this coward who has yet to work up the courage to kill himself and destroy everything.
Frank planned for his death in fanatical detail, making exhaustive lists of his financial assets and debts. In the note to his daughter, he even enclosed money for her car insurance.
Susan, this is so unbelievably horrible. Whatever happened? Here is the $800 check, and what a sorry thing it is. It is probably all that you will ever get from me. I was such a sorry father.
On Thursday, January 15th, Frank, who had been a lifelong advocate of gun control, bought a .32 caliber revolver. That same evening, he went for his last walk on the beach. One of the notes he left behind included detailed instructions for the final disposal of his body.
Gulf Breeze Funeral Chapel. Burial wishes. This is a cowardly, evil, careless man who destroyed everything he came into contact with. I wish to be cremated, of course, and as soon as possible, and as cheaply as possible. There will be no service of any kind nor any visitors, please. My ashes are to be disposed of in the simplest legal way possible. No gravesite. My family will not want the ashes or anything further to do with me. God will not help me, but may he help those souls I leave behind whom I have destroyed. Please grant me these, my last earthly wishes. Frank Dobinson.
One of the officers came back to the house. They said, we have found him, and yes, ma'am, he is dead. I said, how? He shot himself, and Susan said, he used a gun? He used a gun? Oh my God, he didn't use a gun. It's too awful to think. first time I went back to the symphony to hear a concert after he died was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I've never felt so alone.
You as much as I could. I thought as much as anyone could, Suzanne. But you were 10 million times too good for me.
There's so much self-hate in these letters. As though he were worthless and he hated himself. Frank should have gone back to the doctor. He should have gotten himself under psychiatric care, but he did not and would not. I realized that Frank was so far into a depression and so distorted at that time in his own thinking, he saw no alternatives. And I know in my heart that's exactly the way he felt. He saw no alternatives.
It's been 6 years since Ed Gallagher threw himself off the top of the Kensico Dam. In that time, with the help of a psychiatrist and close friends, Ed has had a chance to re-examine his life and has begun to rebuild it.
I don't feel sorry for the guy I am in a wheelchair. I do feel sorry, though, for the guy I was walking. I just knew I wasn't going back to the same old bullshit that I used to do. I wasn't going to categorize and cut my life out to win approval.